The Deluded Narcissist. Human beings experience delusions. A delusion is a false fixed belief that is not amenable to change in light of conflicting evidence. Delusions can occur in the context of many pathological states and appear, for example, in schizophrenia, manic episodes of bipolar disorder, psychotic depression, and narcissism. Delusions can be categorized into 4 different groups. There's the bizarre delusion. Delusions are deemed bizarre if they're clearly implausible and not understandable to same culture peers and do not derive from ordinary life experiences. For example, believing that someone replaced all of one's internal organs with somebody else's without leaving a scar. That is a bizarre delusion. A non-bizarre delusion, a delusion that, though false, is at least technically possible. For instance, the affected person mistakenly believes that they are under constant police surveillance. Mood congruent delusion. Any delusion with content consistent with either a depressive or manic state. For instance, a depressed person who believes that news anchors on television highly disapprove of them. Or a person in a manic state might believe that they are a powerful deity. Mood neutral delusion, a delusion that does not relate to the patient's emotional state. For example, a belief that an extra limb is growing out of the back of one's head is neutral to either depression or mania. There are different themes that are applicable to delusions. Delusions of control, for instance, a false belief that another person, a group of people, or an external force controls one general's thoughts, feelings, impulses, or behaviours. The Cotard delusion, a false belief that one doesn't exist or that one has died. Delusional jealousy, a false belief that a spouse or lover is having an affair with no proof to back up the claim. Delusion of guilt or sin, ungrounded feelings of remorse or guilt of delusional intensity. Thought broadcasting, false belief that other people can know one's thoughts. Delusion of thought insertion, belief that another person thinks through the mind of that person. Persecutory delusions, false belief that one is being persecuted. Delusion of reference, false belief that insignificant remarks, events, or objects in one's environment have personal meaning or significance. Usually, the meaning assigned to these events is negative, but the messages can also have a grandiose quality. Erotomania, false belief that another person is in love with them. Religious delusion, belief that the affected person is a god or chosen to act as a god. Somatic delusion, delusion whose content pertains to bodily functioning, bodily sensations, or physical appearance. For instance, the individual believing that they're somehow diseased, abnormal, or changed. Many of these deluded themes can be found within narcissism. So, for instance, you may well find a delusion of jealousy. It's very common for a narcissist to accuse a spouse or lover of having an affair, but there's actually no evidence to support that. With thought broadcasting, this can be that the narcissist believes that other people knows their thoughts. Persecutory delusions, believing that they're being persecuted. Commonly, delusion of reference, that false belief that insignificant remarks and events have actual personal meaning or significance. Of course, the narcissist that is unaware doesn't realize that they're having their delusions because it's their reality. They cannot accept that when you point out to them that they are deluded, they believe you are and that you're lying because it's their reality. Remember, what you process of the world is simply an interpretation that your brain places on the external stimuli that comes through your eyes, your ears, your nose, your mouth, your fingers, so that taste, touch, sight, hearing, etc. are all interpretations, and your brain does play tricks upon you. Narcissism as a self-defense mechanism alters the perception of a particular individual so that they see the interactions with other people through a lens of the necessity of control and the seeking of fuel. In order to make the narcissist seek the prime aims, control, fuel, most importantly, character traits and residual benefits, it will often cause the narcissist to act in a deluded way, interpreting what somebody has said to mean that that person fancies the narcissist when anybody else would not interpret it in that way whatsoever. Furthermore, what it can do is cause the narcissist to believe that what somebody has written is a secret message to them and only them that they can understand. Delusions are not the sole preserve of narcissists, of course. As I mentioned, they can occur in other psychiatric conditions. But because the narcissism causes the narcissist to look at the world through this lens of seeking the prime aims, it creates those delusions in order to enable the narcissist to achieve those things. The narcissist, however, is not in a permanently deluded state, because the narcissist can see things that you do and agree with them and see them as the same. For instance, the narcissist would describe a tree in the same way that you would. They don't see the tree differently to you. They can also see the behaviours of somebody else and agree that that behaviour is awful, disgusting. But they're using that condemnation of that person's behaviour when talking to you to control you. But in many instances, delusion occurs to assist the narcissist with the pursuit of the prime aims, so that the narcissist sees a threat where there isn't actually intended. Your intention is irrelevant, it's how it's perceived. So that the narcissist sees things that nobody else would see that are there, because it motivates the narcissist to pursue the prime aims. Just recently, there was a report of an individual which may well demonstrate that there was a narcissist, both literally and figuratively, at work. The Telegraph reported IT worker sued boss who marked problems with XX as she thought they were kisses. Karina Gasparova also claimed the use of question marks were code for asking when she would be ready to engage in sexual acts. An IT worker sued for sexual harassment after her rich and powerful male boss marked parts of an email where he wanted more information with XX, which she thought were kisses. Now, that could be a reasonable inference. People do use the X to denote kisses, but not in all cultures. But within the context of their working relationship, she may also ought to have known that that's what he uses when he means provide me with more information. But her delusions get worse. Karina Gasparova, a project manager, also claimed Alexander Gulandrist's use of question marks in the same message were code for asking her when she would be ready to engage in sexual acts. In a number of other innocent work-related incidents, where she would find a sinister motive, Ms. Gasparova thought his renaming a file with his initials AJG was an acronym for a jumbo genital. Accordingly, this lady believes that this man has a sexual interest in her and that he's sending her coded messages. Possibly the behaviour of a narcissist, or it could be some other condition. But based upon these delusions, she then took her employer, the paperless documents firm S-Docs, to a tribunal claiming sexual harassment, which shows that she links that to sexual harassment and exhibits a sense of entitlement to bring a claim which ordinarily is groundless. But a judge threw out her case, ruling that she has a skewed perception of everyday events and regularly misinterpreted innocuous interactions. Again, that isn't the sole preserve of a narcissist, but often narcissists do engage in that, believing that every person that they meet wants to sleep with them, reading things into things that are said to mean that they are special. The Employment Tribunal, held in central London, heard that she started working at S-Docs, which is based in the capital, as an IT project manager in November 2019, under Mr. Gulandris, the co-head and former chief executive. The panel heard Ms. Gasparova tell bosses she thought he wanted to have a sexual relationship with her, sense of entitlement, self-absorption, but was treating her badly because she had rejected his advances. She claimed this included shouting at her, undermining her in meetings with clients and removing key elements of work from her, but the panel rejected these claims. It would appear, therefore, that as a consequence of she believing that she had rejected his advances, that he then responded unpleasantly towards her, but the evidence wasn't found by the tribunal to show that, which demonstrates delusion on her part. Miss Gasparova told the panel Mr. Galandris was a rich and powerful man, and therefore his conduct had not been overt, as a man in his position would be too clever to make obvious moves. The panel ruled this meant her case rested on interpreting seemingly innocent interactions between Mr. Galandris and herself and finding a sinister motive in them. Included in a string of claims which were dismissed by the panel, Miss Gasparova interpreted Mr. Galandris renaming a draft presentation file with his initials AJG in brackets as standing for a jumbo genital. The same month, when Mr. Galandris asked her when a project would be finished, she told the tribunal he burst out shouting with an extremely angry voice saying, "I need date, date, date." Miss Gasparova interpreted this as having been asked the exact date when I would finally agree on sexual contact with him. Clearly, it doesn't mean that, but her level of delusion is such that she interprets it that way. The panel heard later that month that Mr. Galandris had emailed Miss Gasparova asking for information on a project. To indicate what details he required her to fill in, he used XX, YY, and question marks in the message, written in red. The tribunal heard she interpreted the X's as meaning kisses, the Y's as sexual contact of some kind, and the question marks as when she would be ready to engage in sexual acts. In April 2021, she submitted a detailed grievance claim in which all of her sexual harassment allegations were dismissed. She appealed in May 2021. Again, the fact that she's appealing when she's got a groundless case, but she believes that it is meritorious, is also indicative of a delusion which might be supported by the fact that she's experiencing a threat to control and seeks to nullify it by appealing. Her appeal was rejected, so she then resigned. Employment Judge Emma Burns said, "Our primary reasons for rejecting her account of events were that we considered her perception of everyday events was skewed. She demonstrated a tendency to make extraordinary allegations without evidence, and she contradicted herself in a way that could not be attributable to a fallible memory." The Employment Tribunal, having heard the evidence, clearly finds that she has a skewed perception, that she contradicts herself, and that's not just as a consequence of having a poor memory, and that she basically makes spurious allegations without any evidence whatsoever. Sound familiar? They added Miss Gasparova interpreted entirely innocent work-related conduct, some of it accidental by Mr. Galandris, as having a sinister intent. She was ordered to pay £5,000 in cost to Estox following her failure to comply in time with parts of the tribunal procedures. Further details that came out of the claim were that she said that he was trying to chat her up when talking business on a work call where he was running his hand through his hair and staring at her. Again, an interpretation which has no basis in actual evidence. Demonstrative, again, of the way that she interprets the world in a different way. Miss Gasparova claimed that in November 2019, when Mr. Galandris touched her leg with his leg under the table and stared at her, feeling anxious and uncomfortable, the tribunal ruled the incident did occur, but it had been accidental and was innocuous in nature. In other claims, which were dismissed by the panel, Miss Gasparova said Mr. Galandris touched her hand when motioning for her computer mouse and missing it. On a work call in March 2020, she said Mr. Galandris was giving her leering looks as he constantly ran his hand through his hair and started staring at her in between asking her questions. The panel heard that although he had been talking to her about business, she interpreted his behaviour as trying to chat her up because he was spending so long doing it. She invited him to lunch in September 2020 to get some peace from him sending lots of messages. He declined her offer. Miss Gasparova told the tribunal that it was because lunch involved romance and he only wanted sex, again demonstrating a deluded approach from her. In October, she complained about receiving an invitation to the same meeting 16 times from Mr. Galandris, but the tribunal found this was not deliberate or sexual in nature. In January 2021, Mr. Galandris said Miss Gasparov misinterpreted his politeness for flirting when he said, "Have a nice evening," in what she described as an alluring voice. The panel heard Miss Gasparova try to rally support from fellow female colleagues and asked whether Mr. Galandris had ever made sexual advances like leering, winking and touching. Nobody responded to her, suggesting that, of course, he hasn't behaved in the way that she suggests. Now, of course, it's possible that she has some other kind of mental issue. But this belief that he's interested in her, that he's flirting with her, that he's sexually attracted to her, is common behaviour of a somatic narcissist. The paranoia that she exhibits, thinking that he's always wanting to have sex with her and that he's sending coded messages, is something that a narcissist can engage in. And therefore, it demonstrates that this individual was suffering from a particular level of delusion, whereby her likely narcissism was causing her to believe that this man was totally interested in her, chatting her up, and was sending her these coded messages about sex. When viewed objectively, one can see that that's not the case, but she can't. This is something that you will witness numerous instances with certain types of narcissist. Others are more grounded in the reality as you understand it to be, and are better at blending in. But there are narcissists whereby their level of delusion is higher, as it would appear to be the case with this particular deluded narcissist. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.